this is from the NPPC perspective, essentially, of what we're going to be doing public policy-wise in pigs. So here's Washington as Dr. Greiner sees it. I see it similar in that way. We're going to talk about the We Care program a little bit. Animal care, antibiotics is in there, and that's where I'm going to focus most of my time because that's what the presentation is supposed to be about. Food safety, you know, if you listen to Terry there, he was talking about the Nutrition Act and that people are blaming, you know, the school lunch program for obese children. GIP's the proposed rule, trade, etc., and so on. Ag is basically under attack, and that's the last slide that's a good one. So this year, obviously an election year, see there we got a whole lot of things that are not related to agriculture on the agenda of the House and Senate and President. They're going to have a hard time keeping control, and the Democrats are, of keeping the House. And you know, we all have heard the news reports on the President's approval rating. So it's a different time this year. The overall economy just is, you know, continues to be in a recession. We're talking about double dip now and all this other rigmarole. And I'm not telling anybody in agriculture anything new because we all have been there in the last, you know, 4 to 6 years, really, where we've had the increase in costs, decrease in values of livestock and grains, and the up and down of the markets has gone against us more than it's gone for us, it seems like. So that's nothing new. Some other things have gone along out in the world, taking over the auto companies, the Gulf Shore oil spill. That's changing the way Washington's going to look after this year's election. So, get to some of the things that we're doing in NPPC and in the National Pork Board and across the industry. The We Care program, I'm sure you've all seen this. How many people actually own pigs or raise pigs in the room here? I want to get my audience. Raise your hand. I was going to say, I've got more industry-related people in here than the people that actually... So you'll be interested to know what this We Care program actually stands for or comes down to. And what it actually is, it's a kind of a combination of all these things that have come throughout the years. PQA started in '89, and then we added the Environmental Assurance Program, the Animal Well-Being Education in '94, the Environmental Stewards, so on and so forth on down the list there. Yeah, the SWAP program, it is on a later slide, but anyway, the SWAP program was added. So this is kind of the history of our responsibility. And you can see that last one there is pretty neat. I don't know if any of you have seen the pork board, or I don't remember which one did it, the carbon footprint analysis of pork production. And that's something that we thought was going to be paid attention to, maybe less likely now. So this is a slide similar to what Terry showed in the earlier session. You know, challenges that consumers see us that way. This is reality. And I'll add the editorial comment. If consumers want us to go back to raising pigs like that, then they need to give me back their cell phone and give me back their internet connection, because you didn't have either one of those things 50 years ago. And so that's one of the messages. I give a lot of Operation Main Street presentations to people in our community and in different communities, and that's the message I try to leave with them, is that, you know, food producers aren't going to go back 50 years to the way they raised food. So, and you shouldn't have to go back 50 years the way you live and the way you do things. So, situation analysis here. You know, the food challenges, public health. You know, we all experienced the H1N1 and the devastating effect that had. The food safety thing this year with the egg recall and the hamburger recalls that always seem to go on. Antibiotics. I'll get to that a little more in depth here in a minute. Food and nutrition, good food, bad food, cancer, all those things, and you know, we've got a good product to sell but we need to advertise or get that message out there a lot more. You can read there too with me the environment and energy and all that, how that all relates to the way we raise pigs and what we do with the excrement, how that all works. Then animal health and welfare. You know, it seems like it never ends, the list of challenges that we face. And then you start getting down here into the contracts and the competition and concentration of animal feeding and how regulators are going to handle us that way. So with the We Care program, I think it was 2 years ago, adopted at National Pork Board, at Pork Forum, was this ethical principles for U.S. pork producers. And this is a key part of the We Care program, saying that, you know, as producers, we're going to attest to all these things. And I'm not going to read them because you can see them. Indiana Pork has printed them out and given them to put them in a nice little parchment paper that looks all official. And they're really things we were already doing. It's just putting them on paper and in print and showing them to our customers and our consumers and saying, we do these things. This is what we do every day on the farm, and it's a good thing. Some desired outcomes of all the We Care program is that we've got a sustainable, self-regulated industry. In other words, we take care of our own. We don't have to have the government oversee every step of the way, tell us how to do things. And so that retains our ability to raise them and control them the way we want to. Maintain the competitive position in the world economy. I know we've got a couple of packers in here, and that's key to their business, is being able to sell pork across the seas. And so you can read the rest of those down there. Reduced potential threat, reduced likelihood of customers establishing their own requirements. That'd be customers such as McDonald's, Walmart, having a separate set of requirements from what another customer might have. And then reduced risk of new regulations. So if we can get this We Care brand to go and to get consumers and people faithful and trusting in that, then we can prevent a lot of these things down here. And so what happens is we got to, you know, each step of the way we got to branch out, and the pork leadership is actually a consumer. You know, it's inside the entire circle, but we got to branch out one branch at a time. And as Terry said in his earlier presentation, the early adopters are the ones that if we can get them on our side, then they'll pull along some of those early majority and late majority people and get them on our side too. The top line there, we need to focus on producers. That's as far as the We Care program goes, focusing on and keeping producers involved and engaged in advertising and putting out their message of how they do things the right way. But what we're saying there with need to stay above the individual issues is that every person in this room may have a different set of issues that they think is priority, and the individual issues that we may butt heads on. But at the end of the day, we got to get above those individual and be united in this front of We Care about the way we raise animals, and we're going to do it the right way and get that out to our consumers without getting bogged down in all the details and the individual issues that we may be opposing one another on. We got a long-term commitment. I mean, you can look at most of the families involved in raising livestock, and it's been, you know, generations have done it. So, and even when we start thinking about contract producers, they've been farmers for generations. They maybe didn't raise hogs, or they haven't raised hogs for a certain period of time. Now they're getting back to it in order to maintain that farm and keep it going. Yeah, that's probably enough on that slide. So this one comes back to, again, kind of, I'm repeating a lot of what Terry said earlier with the way we got to develop that public and consumer trust is what we got to get back to. And that baseline is the statement of ethical principles. Then we can build on that by doing the PQA Plus, the TQA, and then verify those programs are working right with on-farm assessments, and then hopefully we'll build that public trust. But we got to start and build it up gradually. So there's the PQA Plus slide. If any of you in here don't know about what PQA Plus is, it starts with the Pork Quality Assurance Program, which is a training program, and then we move on down to added in the Swine Welfare Assurance Program was done in 2003, but then we merged those two together into the PQA Plus program. If you've done it, the PQA Plus starts out with the training program of PQA Plus, and then you develop on into the site assessment is basically the SWAP program, is how those kind of two got merged. So that's, and then we'd like for you to, when you do the PQA Plus entire program, to incorporate the use antibiotics responsibly, to follow those guidelines when using antibiotics. So this is a PQA Plus 3-year-old program. So we're getting around to some of the people that signed on initially are due for reassessment. It's an every 3-year program. Individual producer certification is the training part I was talking about, and then we do the on-farm site assessment of the actual animals. Then we move to the, and this is the part that's starting to become developed, is the third-party verification that actually analyze the success and whether or not people are actually doing what they say they're doing. And then you can see down there at the bottom, almost all the packers right now are requiring a PQA Plus with a site assessment to sell pigs. The third-party verification part is, like I said, is just getting started. That's where an entity that's not a packer, not a veterinarian necessarily, not a NPPC or National Pork Board, it's somebody from outside coming in and looking at those numbers and then evaluating actually some of the process of doing the PQA Plus, not necessarily how many pigs are lame or injured or whatever on the farms, but is this process working of verifying these producers and having them checked out by the PQA Plus program. So that's where they'll pool the results, analyze, and learn about what can be improved in the PQA Plus program. TQA, I would like to be administering some of these, but I haven't been trained yet. But is anybody in here else trained on doing TQA? Yeah, Matt, you are, and somebody there in the back. So I don't fully understand the program, but I know it's a good thing because we get most farms, we get employees that are not grow up raising 4-H pigs, and so they don't know where the flight zone is for a pig and how close to get to them and how many to drive at a time and all those things that we all have in the back of our head and we remember from when we were young. So this is a good program to help people that aren't familiar with handling livestock to learn how to do it. And it changed when it was first started in 2002. It was trucker quality assurance, but it's changed now the name to transport because it can encompass farm workers that are moving animals from point A to point B and not only animals going to slaughter. So this is the action plan for those of you in here that actually raise pigs. Uphold ethical principles every day, get your PQA Plus certification, get a premise ID from the State Board of Animal Health. At this point is who's doing that. I know that whole National Animal ID program has kind of been shelved somewhat. It's still in limbo. But the premise ID program is still working and active in the state, right? And so you can still register for a premise ID if you have a new site or anything. And then that premise ID is what's used then when you do the site assessment to track that farm down the line and in the future. So even if the farm would change ownership, the premise ID stays with the site, and then that PQA Plus site assessment can carry on to the next owner as well. And then if you've got people transporting animals between farms in your system, complete a TQA. We Care is a program that was kind of started by National Pork Board, but then NPPC has adopted a position statement on it, and I'll let you guys read through that real quick. It's just, again, another thing that we're trying to communicate to our consumers that we do actually do things the right way out on farms. I'm trying to hustle on up here and get to animal care. I think you've heard about the Ohio and Michigan deals that have been kind of struck, and I know in Ohio it seems like people were on both sides, said they claimed victory, and I think that means that they're still in limbo and don't really know who's going to do what and how that's going to work out. So, and then Dr. Greiner states here that Nebraska, Missouri, and Illinois are next in line as kind of targets of HSUS. So keep your eye out for how those battles go. So then what has been the theory for a while is that once they get, HSUS gets a few states under their belt as victories, then they'll just, instead of trying to go to Iowa, Indiana, some of the key ag states, they'll just jump straight to federal. And so there's no legislative threats yet, but there have been a few things happen. We've all seen them. Maybe some mischief in 2012, the election year, probably not going to happen yet this year, but in 2 years, when it's a presidential election, there will be some mischief going on. And it's, like she says right here, not a matter of if, but when this occurs. So now we get to the true nexus between science and politics, and I like that name because that, I've heard political science described before, and pretty much to me there's no science there. But anyway, so what it boils down to, this antibiotic thing, is about growth promotion, feed efficiency, and prevention. Our opponents don't have a problem with us using antibiotics for treatment or control of a disease. They have a problem with feeding antibiotics to healthy animals, is the way they describe it. But we always counter, if we feed the antibiotics to the healthy animals, then they don't get sick, they stay healthy. So it's always a quandary, and exactly how you explain that is difficult. There's 3 different ways that you can buy antibiotics in a producer level. So, and like I say, you got the OTC, the VFD for feed additives, and then prescription for any injectables that are outside of over-the-counter use. The premise of the opponents of antibiotic use in livestock is that excessive use creates resistance in human bugs, bacteria. But the science says that this only occurs when an organism is exposed to that antibiotic and later becomes resistant after all the sensitive ones die off. And that's explained right here in the change in the DNA by accident, due to exposure, or transfer. And that's the transfer, when transfer of DNA from another microbe is questionable and limited at best, because that only happens in very rare occurrences, and we aren't sure if it even happens to strains of bacteria, and if it happens infrequently, strains of bacteria that have to be related to human disease would have to be affected by it as well. And so there's not, the crossover there isn't easy. And then, like I said before there, the selection pressure, antibiotics never kill every last organism. There's a few that survive, and then those reproduce, and they've got the resistance, and so they develop and pass on that resistance to their progeny. I really like this slide because this is what I get asked a lot is, show me the actual science of antibiotic resistance and what does this mean. So Iowa State, when they get sick, even if we treat them and make them well, they still have a greater presence of food safety pathogens at market. So if we can feed a healthy animal antibiotics and prevent it from ever getting sick, we can prevent some of these food safety pathogens from entering the food chain and becoming part of the problem. So then you go down to the next one there. Pork from pigs produced in modern conventional systems had levels of 3 foodborne pathogens lower than pigs in outdoor systems. So you'll hear from our opponents that, hey, you feed them all these antibiotics because you raise them indoors and they can't breathe fresh air, and so they get sick and you got to feed them antibiotics. Well, actually that's not true. We actually keep them healthier indoors, and we have less exposure to foodborne pathogens because they are raised indoors and not exposed to the outside environments. And so we've got a lower risk of foodborne illness by raising pigs indoors. Then this last one is really the good one. Risk assessments on antibiotic use demonstrate a very low risk to human health from the use of antimicrobials in food animals. Some of the models predict an increased human health burden. So in other words, we call it diarrhea days in humans. Human health burden if antibiotic use in food animals were withheld. So instead of a small number of people getting a bacteria that may be resistant to antibiotics, we're going to have a lot more people have what I refer to as the diarrhea day from a foodborne illness. And so you start to say, well, what's the more important issue? If we have a handful of infections that are resistant to antibiotics, or do we have a lot of people getting sick from foodborne illness day in, day out? Is there questions on the... Oh, and I didn't tell you, AVMA is the American Veterinary Medical Association that I'm a member of, and Dr. Greiner's a member of, and they've been a little bit slow to react on this issue, but I think this statement is very proactive and good to get from the AVMA, because they do think things through and react a little bit more gradually than would some of our commodity groups. So, no case of human infection with resistant bacteria has been proven to be caused by use of antibiotics in food animals. So that's the quote you can use day in, day out against anybody that says we got to quit feeding animals antibiotics because it's causing people to die. Never, ever has happened. So that's a false statement to say that people are dying because we're using food additive antibiotics. And there's little or no evidence, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with Denmark and the Danish experiment on withholding, growth-promoting antibiotics. There's no evidence that changing that will increase or improve the risk of antimicrobial resistance. As a matter of fact, I think the Denmark report, let's see, I saw Karen back there somewhere. Is that published somewhere about the... Because they monitor the level of resistant, I can't remember what bug it is, Clostridium, I think. The level of resistance is still going up even though they've stopped using growth-promoting antibiotics. So there's the proof in the pudding, I guess, a little bit on the way that's worked. So the experiments are being done in other countries. We don't have to model what they've done to prove that it's effective or not effective. This is the theory that has a lot of ifs and thens. If this happens, then this happens. So the theory is that resistance caused by widespread use of antibiotics, the more we expose the organisms to antimicrobials, the more we give them opportunity to develop resistance. But the problem is that may be true, but it's very simplified and it's general overall, and it's saying that this could happen. It's not saying that it actually does happen. And then there's no scientific evidence of how, if, or to what extent that affects human health. It may happen out in the world, and when we treat a group of pigs with whatever antibiotic, we can't use that antibiotic the next time when they break with that same disease because the group of bacteria is resistant. But that doesn't mean those transfer to bugs that cause human disease. Just some little scientific things in there. So we got these two bills that have been proposed in the Senate and the House, and what does it really mean? And you can read there and talk to your friendly animal health rep. A couple of them are in the room here, and find out what that means to their world. But the manufacturers have to prove again, after they've already proven for use to the FDA, that their medicines are safe. Then there's the second part is defining a critical antimicrobial animal drug, and there's 7 classes that are potentially going to be restricted, or I'm not real clear on all the wording in these bills. But then you get down to this definition of non-therapeutic. And that in that case, there would only be treatment uses of feed and water antibiotics. You'd lose the prevention and control of, say, ileitis, dysentery, mycoplasma with Linco, some of those kind of things. These two bills, it's kind of interesting. Is this really good policy or is it politics? And you can see there's the sponsorship of this bill for the House bill. 10 plus came from California, New York, and then 7 to 10, Ted Kennedy's state, because this was the thing that he was focused on before he died, was the antibiotic use. And so you can see this little quadrant right up here, down there, the coast. In the middle, we're not really too concerned about the antibiotics in the food animal supply chain. So that brings the question forward of, is this policy or politics? So the new FDA Deputy, he's made some statements that are pretty troublesome to us in animal agriculture. You can read them right there. FDA believes the use of medications for prevention and control should be under the supervision of a veterinarian. You know, I'm all for that. I'm a veterinarian. But I can tell you right now, there are not enough of me out there to supervise the use of every antibiotic for prevention in this 50 million population of pigs out here across the country. So we're going to have, if this is a requirement, we're going to have a shortage of food animal veterinarians. We already do, but it's going to be even more exacerbated. And then the second part there, they support the bill to phase out growth promotion, feed efficiency uses of antimicrobials in animals. So right there, we got a government agency supporting the elimination of growth promoting antibiotics. And then they recommend that any proposed legislation facilitates timely removal of non-judicious use of antimicrobial drugs in food-producing animals. Well, I don't know what non-judicious use means. I guess I always, when I recommend an antibiotic, it's judicious. We're trying to use, most producers won't spend $50 on an antibiotic if I tell them that the job will be done for 10. If I recommend it at this rate and they say, well, I'll just go ahead and use double because I want to spend twice as much money, that doesn't happen, So that's what I would say is non-judicious use. So here's a whole list of the mischief that's going on in Washington. And you can see Representative Slaughter's name down through there. I think is that right? Yeah. I can't remember what state she's from, and I don't remember if it's up there or not. Okay. But anyway, yeah, she's the one that's kind of pushing this along and trying to find friends and people to help push this removing antibiotic overuse. So, Karen, what's PAMTA stand for? I've forgotten. That was one that threw me last night, and as I was looking through these slides, I was like, PAMTA. Yeah, I should remember what that is, but it's an acronym for Antimicrobial Treatment Act or something like that. But anyway, it's a way to limit the use of antibiotics in food-producing animals. And some more mischief. So we got some articles written in newspapers. We've got a FDA meeting in January that some people met. Animal Ag Coalition met with the FDA. I don't know how many of you seen the Pew Commission report. It wasn't very friendly to our industry. We had a CBS story. I think I've got slides of some of these, but you can read down through there. And then we've got this FDA issues a guidance document for the industry, judicious use of medically important antimicrobial drugs in food-producing animals. And that's when finally then we got the AVMA House delegates to, after they read through and thoroughly researched everything in antibiotics, passed 2 resolutions, that one of which we saw had there earlier. So this was at the meeting with Ag Coalition. The FDA said some of these statements that growth promoters are non-judicious use, no matter for what reason. Antibiotic growth promoters are not justified for any amount of risk. That comes back to the zero tolerance rule that we get from the World Trade Organization and some other world entities. Zero tolerance means that we can't take any amount of risk. If there's a chance they develop resistance, we cannot use them at all because there's that zero. We want zero risk. And then we get down here to this last one. Veterinary oversight is undefined. I mean, how many times a year do I have to visit that farm to count as veterinary oversight? Or do I have to hand you the bottle of antibiotic? Or do I have to give the pig the injection? Or do I have to stand there and supervise the addition of that antibiotic to the feed? What is the definition of veterinary oversight? I don't know. So then that end of June, FDA Current Thinking. How am I doing on time, by the way? Okay, good. I don't think I've got that much more, so we'll get through here pretty quick. use of medically important antibiotic drugs in food-producing animals should be limited to those uses that are considered necessary for assuring animal health. This is the FDA talking. So these comments on this rule were due August 30th, and so I guess now that's anybody in here know how that's going right now. Basically, it's in FDA's court now to set the rules from. I think it was 2008 the bill was passed that they were supposed to create rulemaking on use of antibiotics, but don't quote me on that. Let's see. Yeah, the changes to VFD's veterinary feed directive, for any of you in here that don't know what that means, that's what we have to use for Palmitil and Nuflor right now, are the only two drugs that are covered under VFDs. And my thinking is swine is the only species. Is that right?
Fish.
Oh, fish. You can do a VFD for fish. Okay. I've never done one, so can't quote that directly. So, we start to think about, well, there's quite a fair amount of antibiotic used in poultry. Why isn't there a VFD? Well, what's happened is those were older drugs that have all been grandfathered in. No new drugs for food-producing animals have been developed since the VFD, except for Palmitil and Nuflor. Those are the only two new antibiotics that have had to come under the VFD rule. They're wanting to change the way we have to do our VFDs. I don't know if it's better or worse. My guess is it's going to be worse because it's going to take more time and effort on my part to verify that I've seen the animals and that I keep record of that. A lot of more paperwork. And that was another one that the comments were due the end of August. This was a news article, I believe, and I don't know what paper it was in. Pardon me for that, because this is, again, Dr. Greiner's slide. But you can read that about he got cut by a boar on the leg, and the boar had been fed low doses of penicillin. Now, I don't have any farms that feed low doses of penicillin to their pigs on a routine basis. Zero. Zilch. None. So, to say that, first of all, and then the second part, to say that he was nearly killed by modern-day farming, that's a bit of a stretch, in my opinion. But, reporters can do what reporters want to do. So, anyway, and then they stretched that, even though that was a stretch to say nearly killed by modern-day farming when he got an injury on the farm. Then other Americans living far from barns and pastures are similarly at risk. They stretched once, and then they stretched again from that stretch. So, yeah, that's what can happen if we don't get a hold of this thing. And then this was the CBS report, animal antibiotic overuse. Is it creating, and I don't know how many of you watched it when Katie did her little thing, but I think NPPC's veterinarian got a full 30 seconds of FaceTime on there after I understood a 60-minute interview. And the whole story was about 8 to 10 minutes, and got a 30-second segment out of that for our side. So we know they have an agenda against us. Antibiotic resistance and all the antibiotic use, this leads us into food safety. This egg recall didn't help what Washington already thought was a broken system. But at the end of the day, as any of you heard in Terry's presentation, in the last 10 years, foodborne illness is down a full 40%. So the real story is that we're doing a heck of a lot better than we've ever done before, but we still have a few bad things, and with the current media and the 24-hour news cycle, those bad things can be just ballooned out of proportion to what they really, really are. So there's a House bill. You can read down through there kind of what's going on, trying to achieve better food safety through regulations is the deal. And this mandatory recall thing, that's what just devastates companies if they're involved in that. You're done. I mean, there's just not much recovering from a recall of 70-80% of your product for that month or week or quarter, whatever time period it is. And then there's a Also a Senate bill, Food Safety Senate bill. This is a disturbing one. This is FSISUSDA.gov website. You come down here and you click on the science button. Same source supplier list. Click on that button. It takes you to this list. FSIS Residue Violation Information System. Right here. Bruce Hill, and I can say it because it's on the internet. Anybody can go look at it. Sent roaster pigs to Clausen Meat Packing in Turlock, California, and had violative residues of carbadox over the .03 tolerance of 0.55. So this is what FSIS is reporting on their website. So I guess we got to use antibiotics and observe your withdrawal times, because you don't want to be on this list. This would be bad. And that's worrisome that that's out there for anybody to pick up and use for whatever means necessary. Since I was talking about antibiotics, I'm just going to slide through these slides real quick. You can look at that. Like I said, Mrs. Obama's already said, we want to get healthier children, less obesity, yada yada. And I don't know if we can do that through regulation or changing the way we raise food. I seriously doubt it. But that's what their goal is. The GIPSA proposed rule, I'm sure many of you have heard about it or gotten calls to action from the NPPC about this. They did eventually get the comments delayed till November 22nd. It's a lot of contract legal writing and stuff that I don't understand. If you got questions, ask the NPPC people or Josh Trenari's pretty well versed in it. He's not in here, I don't think, right now. No, but Josh can help you out on what this whole GIPSA rule means, and if you're worried about it and want to sound knowledgeable when you talk to your legislator, talk to him. So that's, I'm going to skip that slide. So pork exports, here's a little bit of good news, but the hazard in this good news is that any changes in the way we use antibiotics or any violative residues or those kind of things can drop that off in a heartbeat. In a real hurry. So anyway, good news, but thin edge. This is the summary, kind of. We've got a growing force of opposition, and Terry put up a similar slide to this. PETA, Humane Society of the U.S., so on and so forth. And then we've got these real important sounding name places like Center for Science in the Public Interest, and it's an activist group is all it really is. They really aren't scientists. They in their name they try to make you think they're scientists. So this one's the other one, PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. It's not a committee of physicians as you would like to think. The name says, that's a committee of physicians. You don't have to be a physician to be in that group, and 90+% are not physicians that are in that group. So, just so you know, this one's ICCR. It's on the next slide. Let me get to it to remember what it. Interfaith Center on Corporate Responsibility. So now we're talking about faith and Christian beliefs and all this kind of stuff, and telling people as investors in different companies, make sure that they're handling animals right and doing everything the right way. Social risk management practices of the companies in which we invest. So they're looking into that. So we're tying in faith now into how we invest and making sure that people on the farms raise the animals the way they want to. And then they get into talking about the science. We're talking about faith and science of antibiotic resistance. So, I don't know.
Well, even worse, they say that swine flu is a red flag for the portion of the meat industry. So, it's just nothing but...
It's just garbage. You're right. It's just garbage. And this is back to... So, here's their links. Pew, Waterkeeper, some of those other enemies that were on that slide before. Union of Concerned Scientists. So, you know where they're getting their information. So it's a kind of the course, to us, it seems like the course is growing. But we're just, it's interesting. I heard yesterday on the radio, I think it was yesterday or the day before, a guy called in to Rush Limbaugh and said that I'm a single issue voter. I only vote on animal rights for animal rights reasons. And he said, so I'm a liberal. And he admitted that. He said, I'm a liberal. I only vote on people that are going to support my animal rights agenda. And so he said, I vote Democrat all the time. And so I said, well, then I feel justified in voting Republican all the time for the opposition to that, because we're on the opposite ends, and we're the 3% on the end of raising animals for meat, and they're on the 3% of opposing that. And we hear each other over the top of this 94% in the middle that could care less what's going on. But that chorus of threats is kind of growing a little bit. It seems to the people in the know. The news media is adding to that with the 24-hour news cycle and the blogs and some of the internet stuff that happens. And then get down to ourselves. And like I said before, we got to get above some of these head-button issues that are details in the whole mix, and come together and say, yeah, we can raise animals the way we want to. And we have to have a unified voice against the opposition, even if we do have our own little quarrels amongst ourselves about exactly the details. We got to get to the top level and unite ourselves against the opponents.